We were in the mixing theater, doing the sound mix, and Trump, was signing one horrible executive order after another. And so the timing of Parade coming out, it really is about whose shoulders do we stand on, and inspiration to say, we need to do something. We need to be together in solidarity, and also ask our allies to join us.
Today on Rainbow Country, Parade, Queer Acts of Love and Resistance. A film that helps to chronicle a history of LGBTQ plus activism in Canada. Joining me to talk about this new documentary is writer and director Noam Gonick and producer Justine Pimlott.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Becker, and this is Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
As young activists, we had a vision. We wanted a world that was free of homophobia.
This was a joyous, profoundly political event.
We made a point. We're here, we're queer, we're in your face.
The straight world wanted us to be invisible.
Homosexuality was essentially illegal.
You could get 8 years in prison or a mental institution.
We're fed up with paying the price of other people's hang-ups. There's no homosexual problem in Canada. There's a heterosexual problem.
This is a time that requires that we be on the street to take up space.
The state would attack us. We were forced to respond. There was no choice.
You didn't know what kind of level of violence was going to take place. Everyone had to dig into a level of courage.
Direct action, of spontaneous action, of people-led action.
We are calling you out! We do this for you! We got locked up for you!
The backlash is upon us.
It is a time to stand up, and I'm really proud of those youth around the world who are standing up to this patriarchy, to this fascism.
It's just a really beautiful thing to think about all of the people who have stepped off of the sidewalk and into the road. This is that genealogy of resistance.
Noam Gonick, hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I am well. Justine Pimlott. Bonjour, comment ça va?
Ça va bien, merci.
Ah bon, bon. I have to say thank you both for being here, to have your voices, your stories be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about your new documentary, Parade, Queer Acts of Love and Resistance. Parade, Queer Acts of Love and Resistance. Noam Gonick, you are the writer, you are the director of this documentary. Let's start from the ground and build up. Talk to me about this powerful and well-done documentary. But what is this documentary about? Let's start there.
Well, the film is about, it's a history of the 2S LGBT plus movement in Canada. We don't say it's the definitive history, but it's a selection of milestones that Justine and I have culled from, the history of this country's movement, starting in the early 60s and coming up until today.
Justine, you are a producer on this documentary. The opening 3 minutes of this film I found rather powerful. We're seeing images, we're hearing voiceovers. Talk to me about those first about 3 minutes and how that came to be.
Yeah, it is very powerful, and a film is made by collaboration, and certainly for Noam and I, one of our key collaborators was our editor Ricardo Costa, and we at the beginning you start off together, Noam and I, me as producer and Noam as director, and then you kind of expand from there as you build the team, and then and then you expand, 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 and then you shrink down again, and then it becomes just you and the director and the editor working together. So those 3 minutes was very much of an intense process collaboration between Noam as director, Ricardo as editor, myself as producer, where we really wanted to, in that 3 minutes, give you a sense of the incredible power of the stories that were about to unfold before your eyes as you started to watch the rest of the film play out. So it really was trying to give the audience a sense of the span in terms of timeline, but the power of the stories and the power of our community and who is part of our community and the diversity of our community. Noam, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, no. Well, actually, here's the question, no. Was that always the intent to start the documentary the way that it does start? Was that always the plan?
Well, the plan was always that the film was going to be made up of a lot of archival imagery. So those first 2 minutes leans heavily into some historic film and video. Much of it called from the National Film Board archives. Justine and I always knew that this film would be a collage, and much of it would be relying on this incredible archival library that we had access to because we were an NFB film. So you see old vintage parades from the early 60s. These weren't pride parades. These were just public parades, Victoria Day parades and whatnot across the coast, agricultural parades. So you really start thinking about this idea of parade. And then towards the end of that opening few minutes, you see other kinds of parades, protest parades, rallies, and that kind of thing. People who've stepped off the sidewalk and into the street and are making their demands. So it kind of morphs. And it's sort of kind of, Justine, I remember you wanted to really be like an encapsulation of the film. And, I think those intros, what do you call it? The first 2.5 minutes before the title it's really to let people know what the ride is that they're going to, settle into for the next, 90 odd minutes.
Mark, how did you feel? How did you feel when you watched it? That 2.5 minutes, just for starters.
I thought it was great because for me, it sets the tone, and it was, documentaries are, they can be powerful, but those first few minutes of a documentary really hopefully pulls in the viewer, and this one truly does. It also features LGBT, some well-known LGBT individuals like musician Lorraine Zagato from the Parachute Club, former member of Parliament, Sven Robinson, activist, and actually friend of Rainbow Country, Tim McCaskill. Noam, talk to me about the process of deciding who would be featured in the documentary. How did this come about in regards to some of the talking heads that you have in the film?
Well, I mean, we started off with a long list, Justine and I. There was a lot of reading of books in the research and development phase, including Tim McCaskill's book. And we sort of made our, wish list. And then we reached out to these people, and we would have Zooms just like this, long Zooms that were recorded. And then we would sort of meet, Justine and I, and then later with Ricardo, and say, who we thought could speak to what. Sometimes we spoke to fantastic individuals, but maybe there were lots of people who could speak to certain moments of the history. So it was almost like a curatorial thing where you sort of decide who would be best to speak to what. And it didn't end after that initial list. This was an extended production process, and there were times, we'd look at a cut of the film and we'd think, we don't have all of the story. We need to go back and find other people to give that story more complexity and depth. We're just hitting the surface right now. So we go back and do more research. And we had great researchers on the film who were deeply connected to various aspects of the community, be it trans, lesbian, the BIPOC community. We had an incredible team of researchers to help us make those connections.
Okay, Justine, I believe her name is Janine Mays?
Janine
that
Mays, yeah, Janine.
that's featured in the documentary. A lesbian. She was married at the time, has a daughter, and you guys tell her powerful story about her being in a psychiatric ward in a Montreal hospital, and she was essentially admitted there by her husband. How did that story come to you guys?
I mean, like Noam said, we have an incredible team of researchers that included an extraordinary archival research team. And so one of the archival researchers, Rebecca Sheffield, who was our archival consultant, came upon that extraordinary footage of Janine and flagged that to us. And then it was a kind of espionage kind of, you know, looking for Janine, where's Janine? Let's try to
Documentary
find Janine.
filmmaking.
Yeah, exactly. And then we brought on Nancy Marcotte, who was our archival researcher, who is Quebec based and French speaking. And then we brought her into the picture. And then Nancy was able to actually track Janine down. And I'm not going to say where Janine lives, but basically be able to locate Janine and get in touch with her. And that's how we were able to bring her on into the film and share her story. And we went down to where she lives and filmed her and had this extraordinary experience with her. She's incredible. She's truly incredible and so powerful. And really reflects that kind of deep understanding of self and that deep understanding of who you are, that authenticity that, one of my favorite lines is when she says, I didn't, they didn't cure me at all. In fact, I was more myself than I was ever going to be. I was just going to continue to be who I am, and yeah, so it was really like Noam said, the team and this team, collaboration in being able to say, we found this extraordinary piece of footage, let's find this person, and that was also really key. And Noam can speak to more to that is, there were certain stories that there was just no footage, there was no archive. And so we really were trying to bring into Parade the stories that had actual archival material that we could use to tell the story visually.
That's right, because there's no recreations. So if we couldn't find it with this kind of vintage unearthed activist footage or NFB archival footage, news clips, if there just wasn't anything, still photos to tell the story, then we had to not tell the story. One of the most exciting things is there's some vintage early 70s activist cinematography of key milestones, a big parade in Ottawa that have never been seen before. And we went and tracked down the shoebox with the Super 8 and we had it scanned, and it's footage that's just not seen the light of day. So it's so cool that in watching Parade, you'll be able to see what was probably our first big 2S LGBT rights parade in Ottawa, early 70s, and for the first time in activist footage. CBC was there, so we had it from their perspective, but we never had it from our own cameras.
Well, that brings me to Glad Day Bookshop, the world's oldest running LGBT bookstore. Gerald Moldenhauer started Glad Day Bookshop back in the day, in the 70s, the early 70s, out of his backpack, walking around with books and all that sort of stuff. You feature Gerald Moldenhauer in Parade on camera. No, talk to me about that particular interview and how that interview with Gerald Moldenhauer came to be.
Well, he was so important, not just Glad Day, but he was the co-founder of the first student queer movement in Canada. And also a very big Toronto gay rights organization as well. He was kind of this expat American in Canada working at U of T who really had a finger in a lot of the organizing in the early 70s. And we actually, we knew we needed him because he also filmed and photographed all these early events. He was the main documentarian. So we reached out to him and we arranged first a pre-interview in Morocco. He has a place in Morocco now. That's where in Fez. So we started with that, and then randomly he was in Toronto right when we were filming a series of follow-up interviews. So we got to properly interview him in studio, which was great, and he really comes across beautifully in the film. Not just talking about the organizations that he founded, but just himself as someone who lived through all the decades and all the various chapters and the way that they affected him, and his sense of history is really, really strong. So we were really lucky that he was around and he was willing to be part of the film and to contribute his imagery. I mean, this film wouldn't really happen without all the activist filmmakers and photographers, people who went ahead and interviewed activists. Those activists might be dead now, but we were able to, use earlier interviews and whatnot. So it wasn't just, when you do this kind of found footage film, you're really only as good as the filmmakers who came before you. So there were video artists, people like John Grayson and Lynn Fernie who are actually in the film, but of course they were also very key to the queer cinema movement in Canada before us as well. So it takes a village to make a documentary.
The title, Parade, Queer Acts of Love and Resistance. What's the story behind this particular title? And I'm not sure who wants to take this one.
Let Noam take that, because Parade was his idea for the title. And then I'm the love and resistance, and I'm the love and resistance part.
Yeah, Justine added the subtitle, which is great because I don't think you'd really know what the film was about without it. But Parade, I guess on the surface, I just wanted that because, as much as possible, we tried to focus on the energy and that sort of exhilaration and exaltation of this movement. Not necessarily about gay pride, although we do go into that, of course, in the film. But just the idea of putting it out there and getting into the streets and demonstrating and walking and doing those marches. So I thought that and then so it was at first it was a single title film, and then it became Parade: Queer Acts of Love and Resistance, and I think all together it sort of tells the whole story.
Mm-hmm. We were really also trying to expand on this notion of parade because, we're not just talking about pride in the film. We're talking also about the ways in which, that you hear in the film when how we were paraded, how we paraded ourselves, and then how we were paraded by the state. And then of course some evolution of pride is also in the film. So it was really trying to expand this idea around the notion of parading.
So Noam Gonick, you are a multi-award-winning filmmaker. Hot Docs, Inside Out LGBT Film Festival, Toronto Worldwide Short Film Festival, Blizzard Awards, all wins from those film festivals, nominated at Venice Film Festival. Congrats to you on those.
I'm laughing because our storage locker was just broken into, and we had to go down and see what the damage was, and that's where I keep all those trophies.
Oh no!
Don't worry, the thieves didn't want any of them.
Oh, good.
But
we had to go to Value Village and see if they're there.
Yeah, I brought up our old Hot Docs award and showed it to Justine. I had to, dust off some layers of silt. Yeah.
So here's the question, Noam. When did you know that you wanted to be a filmmaker?
I think it came to me in around grade 10. I was in Toronto going to Etobicoke School for the Arts. I was originally a theater kid, and it was in Toronto that I was really, I was introduced to experimental underground cinema. And right there, I decided to sort of switch paths. So I went back to Toronto for Ryerson, or TMU. And then I, just sort of began the process. it's never a prescribed path being a filmmaker. It's very, very windy. So you don't graduate from film school and then just apply for a job as a director at the Wicket. It takes a strange, bizarre path, but it's been a great ride.
So Justine Pimlott, you are also a multi-award-winning filmmaker. Chicago International Children's Film Festival, Yorkton Film Festival, Inside Out LGBT Film Festival, Canadian Screen Awards, all wins. Congrats to you.
Thank you.
You also, in 2024, you worked on Any Other Way, the Jackie Shane story. For you, what draws you to work on a particular project? What draws you to a particular project?
Well, it's pretty, my whole life I've pretty much dedicated as a producer and, previously as a film. Well, I consider myself a filmmaker, even though my focus is, producing, have a background also as a directing and writing and so on. But my focus now is around producing and as a creative producer. So my life basically has been dedicated to really amplifying 2S LGBTQ plus stories, queer stories. If you look at my biography, that's pretty much the trajectory of my work. So what draws me? Powerful social issue storytelling and documentary, creative storytelling and documentary. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to work with Noam, because Noam has this wonderful, background as an artist as well as a filmmaker. And so he has a really, interesting visual eye in the way that he sees things, the way that he looks at things. And so there's an opportunity with filmmakers like Noam to push form and to play with form and to make things more, even though you're looking at a social issue, to make it really interesting and dynamic from a visual perspective. And so my priority, my focus has really been about really amplifying stories that are marginalized and amplifying those stories. So that's really my track record. That's my history. That's what I do.
So Noam, earlier I asked about how the decision was made to feature the individuals that are featured in Parade. Talk to me about the researching for this film, this documentary, and how long did that process take, Noam?
Well, I like to take a very kind of non-linear view of time, and I don't like to keep track of the years because I'd probably lose hope if I actually really focused a lot on how many months or years something takes. I also like to lie about my age, so
We could do a split screen, Norm. We could say before and after, what we looked like before and what we look like now. We look pretty damn good, if you ask me.
Noam, here's the thing. Age ain't nothing but a number, and that number is unlisted.
Thank you. Oh,
that's good.
That's good. But the interesting thing is that Justine's really been making this movie in her mind for decades, honestly. I mean, and it's incredible to think that it's taken this long for somebody to do this kind of very popular, accessible queer history of Canada that wasn't sort of an academic film or an extremely experimental art film, but was actually something that can play in classrooms or for large audiences and stuff like that. So Justine's knows the history and the players very, very well. A lot of the people in the film are people that she hangs out in cottages with later and stuff like that.
It's more like it's more like we've done sit-ins together. We've marched it. We've been in. The activism that you see reflected. Noam and I are both filmmakers, and yet we also are are activists as well, in terms of, our art form that we each do is influenced by queer activism and queer stories of activism. So, the people in the film are people that, I've been in marches with. I've done, the die-ins that you see in the film, I was lying there with them. There's no footage of me in the film. There is footage of our editor, Ricardo Acosta, in the Ola section. And there's no footage of Noam. We were searching so we could all have a cameo, but alas. So, we're from community. These isn't arm's length, extraction and going into a community and extracting a story and then appropriating it and saying, see you later. We're embedded, we're part of community, and we have relationships that we built over decades with people and built trust over decades with people. So when, we asked people rather, will you be part of this? Will you tell your story? That trust and those relationships had been building over a long period of time, and I would say that's true with both of us, absolutely. So, so there's the research phase that's around story and what the milestones are and what that history is. And then there's the relationships that you build in documentary and the trust that you build in documentary that are based on your relationships.
So, Justine, Noam had just mentioned that this documentary has been gestating in your mind, in your brain for years now. So, what is, or what was the spark, the genesis for Parade? What was the moment that made you say,
well, first of all,
that film has to be made?
Well, when you see something evolve over your lifetime, right? And you watch and you observe it. I mean, if you think about where we're at today and what's going on in the world today, it's horrific and it's frightening. And in particular, I mean, the attacks on our community, in particular towards our trans brothers and sisters. And so, when we started making this film, we knew that that so much of this history had not been told, or hadn't been told in this particular way. Aspects of it maybe, but not in this particular form. And so that for me was really key, was wanting to tell this history that many from our community don't even know, never mind a larger population of Canadians. And so, and whose shoulders do we stand on? I mean, that was the question. Whose shoulders do we stand on? And a lot of our queer elders are getting even more, or growing old. And, we lost, several people since the making of the film, since we interviewed them, they've passed. And so the urgency to have them tell their stories to us, and for us to bear witness, and for us to give them their flowers and say thank you, that's the urgency, that's the urgency, as well as saying, so many people don't know this story. And I think importantly, I just want to say that, I was a producer at the NFB, at the National Film Board of Canada, making this film, and it was supported by the National Film Board of Canada, and the resources and the time that this film needed, it's required, is really key to have that support from an institution, from a cultural institution like the National Film Board of Canada. It needed time, it needed space, it needed resources. And so, my being a producer at the National Film Board, the timing was then actually perfect to make this film. And then secondly, as we were making the film, the world changed. And yes, there was always essentially homophobia and transphobia and so on. And however, things have so horrifically shifted. And, we always knew, and Noam, please jump in. We always knew that we didn't want to say, oh, we have all of our rights and, we can get married and we're done. We're good. It was like, no, there's still people in our community that are really vulnerable. There are still people that we need to fight for their rights, and against the discrimination that they're facing. And we always knew that in the film, we wanted to bring it around to, wait a minute, so what are the challenges now? And, it's not just hey, we're fine. Yet when we landed in terms of, we were in the mixing theater, doing the sound mix, and Trump, was signing one horrible executive order after another. And so the timing of Parade coming out, it really is about whose shoulders do we stand on, and inspiration to say, we need to do something. We need to be together in solidarity, and also ask our allies to join us. No, do you want to jump in? I mean, I know I kind of went off a lot there. There's a lot there that I covered.
When we started the process, I felt like, well, who has any problems with gay rights and gay history? This might be a bit of a snooze, because everybody's in agreement, aren't they? I mean, okay, gay rights, we all support it. And then really quickly, it began to shift. As soon as we went into production, you began to see, wow, we are actually in the middle of a backlash, or the beginnings of one. And now, if you track the progress of our film, the backlash has kind of, increased in intensity more and more and more as we've come closer to the finish line. So, what we thought was, a history that wouldn't really be contested, suddenly it's a very controversial, edgy film. It's just so interesting the way that history goes in these circles.
I mean, the urgency to make the film for me was the urgency that, that we were starting to lose our elders, and the urgency to get their stories on film and to have them tell us our stories, and tell us their stories, which are our stories, so that the next generation, and even this the same generation of people that don't know them, bear witness.
So this documentary was recently at Hot Docs 2025 in Toronto. Justine, how will the general audiences be able to eventually see Parade?
Yeah, so Parade, so a couple of things. Parade will be on TV Ontario, and it will also be on nfb.ca. So you can, on the website of this, it'll be streaming on nfb.ca, and it'll also be broadcast on TV Ontario, and also be streaming on the TV Ontario website as well.
Or the NFB app, which you can download.
Or the NFB app.
And, watch it in bed.
And I just want to also say that one really important component that the National Film Board does are community screenings and community outreach. And you can actually contact audience development at the National Film Board, and you can do community screenings, and which are really important. Not just sitting at home streaming, but be in community together and watch the film.
So here's my last question, and it's for both of you, and it's simply this: what do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen Parade? Noam, how about, let's start with yourself.
The film is actually a toolkit to how to protest and resist and fight back. And right now, that's exactly what we need. You can see some fantastic case examples from Quebec, from Toronto, people who did it out in BC and took a stand. And, these are just suggestions for things you might want to or need to do to protect yourself and your community as history progresses or regresses.
Justine?
I mean, I think similar to Noam, I think it's to take inspiration for people whose shoulders we stand on, and to invite allies to join in that struggle in terms of solidarity, and to make sure that our rights aren't revoked, and to make sure that those among us who are the most vulnerable have our support, and that we say to those people in our community, in particular our trans brothers and sisters, that we see you and we love you and we're here and we're queer and we're in your face and we're not going anywhere.
Well said, Noam Gonik, Justine Pimlott. Well said, well done, well filmed, well made. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
As young activists, we had a vision. We wanted a world that was free of homophobia.
This was a joyous, profoundly political event.
We made a point. We're here, we're queer, we're in your face.
The straight world wanted us to be invisible.
Homosexuality was essentially illegal.
You could get 8 years in prison or a mental institution.
We're fed up with paying the price of other people's hang-ups. There's no homosexual problem in Canada. There's a heterosexual problem.
This is a time that requires that we be on the street to take up space.
The state would attack us. We were forced to respond. There was no choice.
You didn't know what kind of level of violence was going to take place. Everyone had to dig into a level of courage.
Direct action, of spontaneous action, of people-led action.
We are calling you out! We do this for you! We got locked up for you!
The backlash is upon us.
It is a time to stand up, and I'm really proud of those youth around the world who are standing up to this patriarchy, to this fascism.
It's just a really beautiful thing to think about all of the people who have stepped off of the sidewalk and into the road. This is that genealogy of resistance.